You will be dead in 30 days. You don't know it yet. Right now, you are just a woman walking to the well. 37 years old, a widow, a healer, a neighbor. You have lived in this village your entire life. You know every face, every fence, every argument over a chicken and a debt. But somewhere behind one of these doors, someone has already decided what you are. And the word they have chosen, that word, will be the last thing written next to your name. You are 37, and this morning your neighbor stopped greeting you at the well. At first, it seems like a small thing. In a village this small, people argue all the time. Over a chicken that wandered into someone else's garden. Over a debt for a sack of flour. Over a word said too loudly at the market. But today is different. She is not simply silent. She looks at you as if she has already decided she knows a truth about you that you have not heard yet. An hour later, you notice a second woman pulling her child off the path when you walk by. Then the man near the forge stops talking when you come closer. Then a boy throws a lump of mud at you and runs away laughing. Not with his own laugh, but with the laugh of adults he has heard somewhere and learned to repeat. By evening, you understand. People are talking about you. Not directly, not out loud, not yet. In a village, an accusation rarely begins with a shout. It begins with a pause, with a closed door, with a glance over the shoulder, with a sentence cut short when you enter, with people suddenly remembering things that no one cared about before. That you live alone, that your husband died too early, that you have no sons who could stand up for you in the square, that you know how to make herbal remedies, that last winter you argued with a neighbor over a debt, and a week later his cow fell sick, that once at the well you told a woman, God sees everything, and later her child died. Yesterday, these were separate facts, unpleasant, ordinary village facts. Today, they begin to form a story. And that story is dangerous because you are not the one writing it. Congratulations, you have just become the most useful thing in a hungry, frightened village, an explanation. When the harvest is poor, people need an explanation. When the milk turns sour, people need an explanation. When a child dies from an illness no one understands, people need an explanation. When a man loses money, when a woman gives birth to a stillborn child, when the rain does not come for too long or comes too hard, someone has to become the reason. And if you are poor, alone, sharp-tongued, too old, too independent, too strange, or simply do not have a strong enough family standing behind you, that reason can become you. No one has said the word witch to you yet, but it is already coming for you. You did not wake up as a witch. You woke up as a woman with too little protection. That is an important difference. In a village of the 16th or 17th century, a person rarely exists alone. They have a family, a parish, neighbors, land, debts, a reputation, a place on the church bench, and people willing to say, she is one of ours. If you have all of that, rumor has a harder time reaching your throat. If you do not, rumor moves faster. You are a widow, or almost a widow, because your husband died long ago, went off to war, disappeared for work, or simply left you a house that feels more like a burden than protection. You have no grown son who can argue with men on your behalf. No wealthy brother who can pay a fine, hire a defender, or force the neighbors to be quiet. You have only your hands, a little land, a few chickens, bundles of dried herbs, and the habit of surviving where other people call it stubbornness. and that is already enough. The village does not like women who survive too well without male permission. If you are quiet, you are secretive. If you answer sharply, you are wicked. If you help heal people, you are suspicious. If you refuse to help, you are vengeful. If you ask for a debt to be repaid, you are greedy. If you are poor, you are jealous. If you avoid people, you are strange. If you visit too often, you are interfering in other people's lives. There is no correct way for you to behave. That is the trap. The neighbors begin to remember the past, not the whole past, only the useful parts. The time you asked for flour and were refused. The day you stood by the fence looking at another family's field. The argument at the well. The cow that stopped giving milk. The rain that did not come. The illness that took a child. Everything that used to be chance now becomes a chain. People love chains. They make chaos easier to understand. The priest speaks of sin. The village headman speaks of order. The neighbors speak of fear. But underneath all of it are simpler things. Hunger, debts, envy, death. No one knows how to explain. And the need to find a face people can hate instead of feeling helpless. You fit perfectly. You are close enough not to be a stranger, and weak enough not to be dangerous to your accusers. That is how a witch is born. Not from a pact with the devil, from a village that needs someone to blame. The next day, soldiers do not come for you. No judge, no executioner. At first, it is your neighbor. She stands at your door with the face of someone trying to look kind while already carrying an accusation. She asks about the herbs, about the cow, about the words you said a month ago, about why you were by the stream after sunset. She says she does not want to think badly of you. People always say that right before they begin thinking badly out loud. Then a second woman comes. Then a man from the headman. Then someone says the priest wants to speak with you. That is how rumor becomes procedure. They ask whether you know how to heal. You say you know how to brew herbs, the way your mother taught you. It sounds innocent until it is written down by someone else's hand. They ask whether you argued with your neighbor. You say yes, because he owed you money. That is written down too. They ask whether you told a woman at the well that God sees everything. You say you did. Now it sounds like a threat. You quickly understand the questions are not looking for truth. They are looking for a shape into which fear can be poured. The village begins collecting testimony. Suddenly, everyone has seen something. Someone saw you talking to yourself. You were praying, but that no longer matters. Someone saw a black cat run near your house. The cat is not even yours, but that no longer matters either. Someone heard you laugh on the day another family suffered a tragedy. You laughed at a joke before you heard the news. No one remembers that now. Memory works strangely in cases like this. It does not preserve the past. It reshapes the past to fit the accusation. The headman says everything must be investigated. The priest says evil knows how to hide. The neighbors say there are too many coincidences. And now even those who doubt stay silent, because defending a suspicious woman is dangerous. Today, you are the witch. Tomorrow, someone may ask why they work so hard to protect you. So you are alone before the trial even begins. Not because everyone believes, because fear makes cowards faster than conviction does. When they bring you to the first interrogation, everything looks almost official. A table, candles, men who know how to write, men who know how to quote scripture, men who know how to speak calmly while your life stops belonging to you. They ask you about God, about prayers, about nights, about neighbors, about sick animals, about dead children, about herbs, about dreams, about words you said in anger, about words you do not remember, about things that never happened but are now repeated so often that they begin pressing against you harder than reality. You answer as best you can, but every answer is dangerous. If you cry, it may be guilt. If you do not cry, it may be a cold heart. If you stay silent, you are hiding something. If you talk too much, you are covering your tracks. If you know your prayers, a witch can pretend to be pious. If you make a mistake in a prayer, there is the proof. If you are confident, you are insolent. If you tremble, your conscience is betraying you. In cases like this, there is no correct tone. The judges do not necessarily think of themselves as cruel men. That makes them more dangerous. Many of them are certain they are protecting the community. They sit behind the table not like villains from a story, but like men who have been given power over other people's fear. They believe order must be restored. They believe evil must be named. They believe that if a village is frightened, there must be a reason somewhere. And if the reason is already sitting in front of them, tired, poor, without a strong family, and with a damaged reputation, everything becomes easier. Your words are translated into the language of the court. I helped heal people becomes she knew herbs. I argued becomes she threatened. I was alone becomes she could have done secret things. I am not guilty becomes she denies it, as witches usually do. The most frightening thing is not that they do not believe you. The most frightening thing is that anything you say can become part of the evidence. Then begins the thing people in the village speak about in whispers. They examine you, not because you are sick, not because they want to help you, but because once people begin believing in witches, they begin looking for proof on the body. Moles, scars, marks, old traces of illness. Anything that yesterday was simply part of life can now receive a new name, a sign, a mark, a trace, evidence. You stand before strangers and even your body no longer belongs to you. This is not only humiliation, it is a way to break the boundary between you and the accusation. As long as witch was only a word, there was still something to argue against. But if they find a mark on the body, the argument becomes harder. People love proof they can point to with a finger. They do not care that such proof could be found on almost anyone if you search long enough and with enough bias. Everyone has a scar. Everyone has a mark. Everyone has some place where the skin is different from the skin beside it. But today, they are not searching everyone. They are searching you. The women who once asked you for a remedy for pain now say they always felt something wrong around you. The man who once asked you to delay repayment of a debt now remembers that after your argument, his barrel of beer spoiled. The mother of the dead child cannot accept that illness simply came and took him. It is easier for her to believe someone did it. Not because she is a bad person, because random death is too heavy for the heart, and you become the shape into which people place their pain. That is what an accusation does best. It takes an ordinary life and rewrites it backward. It takes your hands, which worked, your voice, which argued, your loneliness, which was poverty, your knowledge of herbs, which was an attempt to help, and it turns all of it into proof that you were dangerous all along. You try to explain that the mole has been there since childhood, that the scar came from a knife, that your mother used the same herbs, that a cow can fall ill without a curse. that children die even in the homes of good people. But explanations sound weaker than fear. Fear always speaks louder. After several days, you begin to understand what they really want. Not just evidence, a confession. A confession is convenient for everyone. For the judges, it gives order. For the priest, victory over evil. For the neighbors, certainty that they were right. For the village, an explanation. If you confess, the world becomes understandable again. The illnesses did not come for no reason. The harvest did not fail for no reason. The child did not die for no reason. All of it can be placed at your feet and called a closed case. But for you, confession is a pit with no bottom. If you do not confess, they say you are stubborn. If you confess, they ask who else was with you. If you name no one, they do not believe you. If you name names, other lives begin collapsing beside yours. That is how fear multiplies. One accusation gives birth to a second, the second to a third. The village begins devouring itself and calls it purification. At first, you hold on. You say you are innocent. You repeat your prayers. You ask them to bring people you helped. You ask them to remember that you treated children, not harmed them. But no one came here to remember the good. The good does not fit the case. Then come the nights, the cold, the loneliness, the sleeplessness, the voice asking the same question again and again. Men telling you that your denial only proves your connection to evil. You begin to grow so tired that truth stops being a firm wall and becomes a heavy stone you can no longer hold. Here is what people often misunderstand about confessions in cases like this. They do not always appear because the person is guilty. Sometimes they appear because the person can no longer endure a process that demands the impossible, to prove that they are not the thing everyone has already decided to call them. And if you finally say what they want to hear, they will write it down as truth, not as exhaustion, not as fear, not as an attempt to stop the pain, as truth. That is how a document is created. That is how evidence is born. That is how, hundreds of years later, someone can open an old record and say, "But she confessed." Yes, she confessed. After the entire world around her had been built so that confession became the only exit left to her. When the case becomes public, the village changes. People who were afraid yesterday now feel relief. That is the unpleasant part. An accusation of witchcraft may be terror for you, but for everyone else, it often becomes a cure for uncertainty. Now they have an answer. Bad harvest? You. Sick cow? You. Dead child? You. Arguments, debts, fear of winter, strange dreams, milk that soured too quickly. All of it can now be connected to you. Not because the connection is real, because it is useful. People begin telling stories with more confidence. What yesterday was, "I thought I saw," becomes, "I saw." What was rumor becomes memory. What was resentment becomes testimony. A woman who was afraid to say something first now speaks loudly because the crowd is on her side. A man responsible for his own debts now says your envy ruined him. The accusation frees people from responsibility for their own lives. That is its power. The priest speaks of repentance. The judge speaks of order. The headman speaks of the safety of the village. No one speaks about the fact that your house may now be taken. No one speaks about who will receive your things. No one speaks about the old debt that now may never have to be repaid. No one says that an accusation is sometimes very useful to those who support it. History likes to portray witch hunts as madness of the crowd. Sometimes that is true, but often it is simpler and dirtier. There is property here, land, debts, envy, old resentments, family conflicts, men who dislike a woman who speaks too directly, women who need a way to explain their own grief, power that needs to show it can control invisible evil, and you stand in the center of all of it, like an empty space into which everyone brings something of their own. That is why an accusation is so hard to stop once it has begun. It feeds too many people. Some with fear, some with power, some with revenge, some with relief. By the time of the sentence, you almost no longer recognize your own life. The house where you lived is now described as a place of dark deeds, the herbs hanging from the ceiling as signs of evil knowledge, night walks as secret meetings, arguments as curses, prayers as pretending, silence as stubbornness. Everything that was yours has become someone else's story about you. The court speaks calmly. That is one of the cruelest things about places like this. Words that destroy a life are often spoken in an even voice. The men behind the table do not look like monsters. They look like people who have finished a task. If you are sentenced to death, the world does not stop. Somewhere, people are still bargaining at the market. Someone is baking bread. Someone is fixing a roof. Someone is arguing over a goat. The village continues living, and that almost feels insulting. You thought that when your life was finally taken from you, the air would change. It does not. If you are banished, that is almost death too, only stretched out. Where will you go? Who will shelter a woman with a name like yours? Who will hire you? Who will buy your herbs? Who will allow you to live near children? You may walk down the road, but the accusation will travel ahead of you faster. If they leave you alive after confession, life still does not return. People will look at you differently. Doors will close earlier. Children will point. With every new misfortune, your name will rise again. A woman once accused rarely becomes simply a woman again. That is the trap. Even if you survive, the accusation can live longer than you. It becomes part of village memory. It sticks to your house, to your belongings, to your family, to your daughters if you have them. People may forget the details, but they will not forget the word. Years later, someone will say, "That is the one." Even if no one remembers how it began. The sentence is not only a decision of the court, it is permission for society to stop seeing you as human. Many years later, if someone opens the documents of your case, they may see lines, name, age, place, accusations, testimony, the court's decision, maybe a confession, maybe a list of witnesses. Everything will look neater than it actually was. The archive is always cleaner than life. The archive will not contain the smell of the damp cell. It will not contain your hands shaking from the cold. It will not contain the neighbor who was afraid to admit that she simply hated you because of an old debt. It will not contain the child who died from an illness no one understood. It will not contain the field that failed because of the weather. It will not contain the male gaze that disliked the way you answered too sharply. It will not contain the long years of poverty that made you a convenient target. The archive will contain one word, witch, and that is the most dangerous thing in the history of women like you. The accusation often survives the person. It becomes shorter than a life, but stronger than a life. One word replaces everything: how you worked, whom you loved, whom you helped, what you feared, how you survived your husband's death, how you asked for a debt to be repaid. how you fell asleep alone in a house that was colder in winter than outside. History does not always lie directly. Sometimes it simply preserves the words of your enemies better than your own voice. That is why cases like this must be read carefully, not as proof of magic, not as a fairy tale about dark times, but as traces of a society that often solved its problems by throwing them onto those who could not defend themselves. When a court calls a woman a witch, it does not speak only about her. Often, it speaks about the village, about what it feared, whom it hated, whom it owed, whom it could afford to lose. You may disappear from life, but the paper will remain, and on paper, everything will look as if the world was certain. The world often looks most certain when it is most wrong. The real story is not that you flew at night, not that you spoiled milk with a glance, not that you made secret bargains with forces the village was afraid to name. The real story is simpler and more frightening. You were a woman in a world where it was dangerous for a woman to be inconvenient, too poor, too alone, too old, too knowledgeable, too sharp, too needy, too unprotected. And when disaster happened nearby, people chose you as the shape for their fear. That is what makes this story so heavy. An accusation of witchcraft rarely began with evidence. It began with relationships. Who owed whom? Who disliked whom? Who envied whom? Who was weaker? Who was alone? Who could disappear in a way that allowed the village afterward to keep living with the feeling that it had become cleaner? You were not a monster. You were an answer people invented because the real world was too complicated. Illnesses were unexplained. Harvests depended on weather. Children died. Animals fell sick. Men drank. Debts grew. Winter came too quickly. God was silent. And instead of admitting helplessness, the village found a woman and said, "There is the reason." That is how fear becomes law. That is how rumor becomes a document. That is how a poor woman becomes a witch. And somewhere in the next village, in the next year, it will begin again. Another woman will not be greeted at the well. Another child will fall ill. Another cow will stop giving milk. Another man will remember an old argument. Another priest will say evil walks nearby. Another woman will hear her name spoken more quietly than yesterday. At first, she will not understand. Then she will. People are talking about her. And from that moment on, her life will no longer fully belong to her.